Hello, my name is Enno. I'm a security researcher currently working at Semgrep, and this will be a quick video to go over the difference between pattern not and pattern not inside, and why generally, instead of using pattern not, you want to be using pattern not inside instead to remove findings. And so this is one of the most common mistakes that I see in our community Slack, where people ask for help with their rules that do exactly that. And so here's a quick example to demonstrate. Here we match a plus b and use pattern not to remove findings for lines with a plus b plus c. And so if we run this, you might intuitively imagine that there would be no finding on line 5, except there is. The reason why is because they're using pattern not. Spoiler alert. But so to dive into why, Semgrep has this dash dash dump AST subcommand, whose output I do not expect you to be able to understand. I barely can as well. So I drew it up in this little diagram. So Semgrep parses code into an internal representation called an abstract syntax tree, or an AST for short. And so here on the left, you can see the AST for the A plus B pattern and the AST for A plus B plus C. And so the difference between pattern not and pattern not inside is that pattern not will try to match these two trees exactly, whereas pattern not inside will do the smarter behavior of checking recursively inside. Pattern not sees this tree, and if it thinks that these two trees are different, which in this case they are very different, the one on the right has this it just has more branches, right? It's a bigger tree than this one on the left. And so because they are different trees, it is unable to compare them, which is why the pattern not does not work in this rule. And so what pattern not inside does instead, which is the smarter, easier to work with behavior, is it checks that this tree is somewhere inside this tree. Or more correctly, it checks that this code is somewhere inside this code. And so if we change this to pattern not inside, then this match is removed because it's able to more intelligently compare these two. And so given that we established that pattern not is for kind of exact matches, whereas pattern not inside can be used in a more fuzzy way and is more lenient, would you expect pattern not to be able to remove findings for this when the findings are produced by this pattern? And the answer is actually yes. Even though this pattern not pattern requires there to be a print line statement inside the function body, both of these patterns are actually matching function bodies, right? That is the like outermost shape. And so because the outermost shape of the matches are the same, Semgrep is able to compare them. And so this rule actually does work, even if you don't use pattern not inside here. Although you can though. It still works. Here is another example. Here we have a pattern that matches a list that contains ABC somewhere inside. And here we have a pattern not, which removes findings for lists that are ABCD. And here we have another pattern not that removes findings for lists that are ABCD, and then that contains an inner sublist. And similarly to the previous example, even though both of these lists have a different number of elements than the matching pattern, these still work as pattern knots because the outer shape for both of them is still a list. And so therefore, Semgrep is able to remove findings on line 5 and 8 here as well. And also in this case, you can just use pattern not inside as well. It works either way. And that's kind of the reason why I say to use pattern not inside over pattern not, because generally you're not going to be comparing code with the same shape, and it's also going to be hard to kind of figure out what shape Semgrep represents a piece of code internally as, right? You don't want to care about that when you write rules, and so pattern not inside lets you do that, whereas pattern not is a lot more finicky, and you kind of do have to worry about that. And so a little tip that I like using for debugging my pattern knots and pattern knot insides, which I'll just call negative patterns from now on, whereas patterns and pattern insides are called positive patterns. So a little tip that I like to use for debugging my negative patterns, because when you're debugging, you want to see output, right? But negative patterns kind of remove output, right? And so that makes them hard to debug in a lot of circumstances. So what you can do is you can isolate your negative pattern that you want to test. And so you just turn your negative pattern into a positive pattern instead. And so because Semgrep uses the same pattern matching logic for both positive and negative patterns, or at least very similar, you can use this trick of turning negative patterns into positive patterns and seeing if they match what you want to remove, in this case line 5. And if it does match, then you can be reasonably sure that this will work as a pattern not inside pattern, or a pattern not pattern. And so doing the same for this other one, if we just change this into a positive pattern, then we can see here, this one also matches this. Therefore, this will probably be removed when turned into a negative pattern. And yeah, this is just a very short video for the difference between pattern not and pattern not inside. Please leave your feedback below if you have any, and thanks for watching.